Hello, welcome to Garibaldi Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. I'm Max Hayes, your host, and with you live for the next 20 minutes to discuss the eagerly anticipated clash under the lights tomorrow night against Spurs. Forest v Tottenham Hotspur, as Brennan Johnson makes his return to the City ground in front of the TV cameras. A huge game for Forest and a difficult one too. To discuss the preview with me and more, I am joined by, first of all, Forest fan and broadcaster George Butler. George, good to see you. How are you?
I'm good, Max. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, mate. I'm very good. This is a nice break from essay writing. It's been a week of university deadlines, so I'm looking forward to talk football for the next 20 minutes. Also joining us is Seb Jenkins from the opposition side. He's the editor of the Spurs Web. He covers Spurs home and away. Seb, good to see you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat some football.
Yes, definitely. George, let's start with you then, because Brennan returns on Friday night. That adds a little bit of it into the mix, as well as Steve Cooper, as ever, under pressure, which seems like he's on this one game kind of rolling basis so far. What have you made to the pressure that Cooper's found himself under, George? And we come off the back of a decent point away at Wolves. But how big a game is this on Friday night, do you think?
Well, it's a huge game. I mean, it feels like we've been here before. As you said, it's the sort of the carousel of pressure that Cooper is constantly under. I listen. I mean, I'm like many Forest fans. I think it's quite unfair, to be perfectly honest, and I don't think it really does the team any good. That kind of constant threat of is it who's going, who's staying, what's round the corner. So look, it's the nature of the Premier League. It's certainly the nature of the Forest leadership as well. But I personally don't think it does any particular favors to the team. Obviously, we saw the other day, the team that got picked really went out there, and especially in the second half, they seem to really be fighting for Cooper. So there is that kind of flip side to it, in which the players are going out there knowing that in order to keep their manager, they need to go and put a really good performance out there on the pitch, because it does feel like a bad result is the excuse needed to get rid of Cooper.
Yeah, definitely. And it certainly could see Steve Cooper gone from his job, especially if it's anything like we saw away at Fulham with that 5-0 thrashing. We are live on YouTube and Facebook, Garibaldi Red and Nottingham Forest News. So if you want to get your comments in, that would be greatly appreciated. And you can put them to the panel as well of George, Seb, or if you've got a question even for me, and we will answer those in the next 20 minutes or so. Seb, from the Spurs perspective, this is a big game for Forest. It's an bigger game for Spurs too. There's no easy game in the Premier League, but this is a game that Spurs, from your perspective, I guess will be targeting as a win. And after turning it around with that kind of poor form you found yourselves in, similar to Forest, although not that bad. And now you come to the City ground on Friday night after a 4-1 thrashing over Newcastle. Really, how can you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, with Postecoglou at the minute, I think every game he sets up to win, regardless of who it's against. So I think it's going to be one, being on a Friday night, I think always seems to just be this melting pot for a really, really great game in the Premier League. And yeah, I think we're just going to have two teams that are pretty open and attacking at their best. So yeah, I reckon we're going to see a fair few goals, hopefully, under the lights, which should be really, really good.
Yeah, and definitely. And remember, sorry, I was on mute then. And remember, if you want to get your predictions in for the game or any comments, you can do so by commenting on YouTube and Facebook. George, in terms of kind of the actual game on Friday night, this will be a game that Forest, the under the lights, the atmosphere, the fans right behind Cooper, most likely. I think we'll see great support of him, because this could be a game, like you said. If we lose, it's maybe an excuse to pull the trigger on Steve Cooper. So maybe the fans will see this as a farewell. How important do you think it is for Forest to get back to winning ways, not just in general, but also at the City ground? Because we've seen last season how important the City ground was to making sure that Forest could pick up points and ensure Premier League survival.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely vital. I mean, we've seen this season, to be fair, a marked improvement in how we play away from home. I mean, obviously, it couldn't have got much worse from how it was last season, but we're so much more solid. We seem to kind of have a little bit more of our wits about us when we're away and play a bit more sensibly. So I don't think we're going to rely on our home form like we did last season, where it literally was the sole reason we stayed up. But at the same time, in the Premier League, you have to be strong at home. And I think we're going to really obviously need to pick up the majority of our points there this season. And this is the sort of game last season where on paper we're kind of going into it thinking we haven't really got much of a shot, but let's see what happens. And how often last year, whether it was the Arsenal game, the point against City, the Liverpool win, did we go into the City ground games against one of the big teams thinking, I'm not sure about this, and in that crowd, that atmosphere, the players kind of really just grinding out a victory or a point. And I'm hoping tomorrow we can have more of the same. I think the atmosphere is going to be special tomorrow. I think it will be, as you say, there is a lot of love out there still for Cooper, and I think people are slightly realistic that who knows how many games he may have left at the City ground. So I think it will be a special atmosphere, and being on a Friday night, as Seb said, is always good in the Premier League.
Yeah, and also something more to add to it as well with Brennan Johnson making his return. George, do you think that's a player that Forest have missed recently? Creativity-wise, there's a cry out amongst fans in the terraces for having that player that can almost be the link between midfield and the final third, and Brennan really was that for us, wasn't he?
I mean, I don't think we could have missed a player more, to be perfectly honest. And I know last season some people felt like he didn't do enough or didn't feel like he was involved enough, but I think we're all looking at the team now, and look, we brought in some decent replacements. It's totally not knocking the wingers that we brought in. They're good, they're decent players, and they've done a pretty good job. But the difference in his quality is, when he's not there this season, is so marked. I mean, even for Gibbs White, for example, he hasn't got that outlet that he had every single time that he picked up the ball. It was like, where was Brennan? And it wasn't just getting the ball to Brennan, it was knowing that when the ball was at Brennan's feet, he was going to do something. That's the thing. He always produced that moment of magic. Even if he didn't touch the ball for an hour, he would always produce that assist, or he'd get that goal, or he'd have that shot we'd win the corner for and score from. And I think we've really, really, really missed that, because actually, even when you're not playing well, to have a player of that quality, always threatening, always being able to create something, is a huge, huge loss. And I think we've really, really missed him. And it's not a surprise. And obviously we all know the reasons why we had to sell him. But I mean, I've missed watching him play as well. He's such an exciting player to watch because he's so quick. And I'm sure Seb's been enjoying him, playing for Tottenham. But I miss watching him, and I hope he gets, and I'm pretty sure he will get, an amazing reception tomorrow evening.
Yeah, Seb, how has he settled into Spurs? Kind of judging from watching him on the TV and watching him play, is that he seems like he's settled in quite well. Is he enjoying life at Tottenham?
Yeah, I think he's getting to that point now. I think he struggled maybe a little bit at the very start, as players do when they kind of make a bit of a step up in the Premier League. He was kind of in and out of the team with Richarlison and him alternating on the left. He picked up an injury as well. But I think his game against Newcastle last time out, I think, was the best 90 minutes that we've seen from him. He was just unplayable. You guys know how fast he is. Playing him off the right side now, which I think is where he'll probably start against you guys. He knocks the ball past them and just goes. I think he's really, really starting to hit his stride now in the new team, playing in kind of a new system under Postecoglou. But it's great to hear the glowing reviews from you guys when he's really gets to his peak as well.
Yeah, definitely. And he was a great servant for Forest as well, kind of coming through the academy and being loyal to us during the bad seasons and the good ones, of course, ultimately with promotion. Dan says in the comments, which defender would you put on Brennan? George, I suppose that's a question that kind of nicely falls on you, really. Who would you be putting out of that Forest, whether we play a back five again or Forest go for the classic kind of Cooper back four?
I think we will play a back five. I think we played pretty well in that second half midweek, and I think we will use that back five to hopefully slightly combat that Spurs system with the pace on the wings, and obviously Brennan being a part of that. So I think obviously the left-sided centre back is going to play a big role in that space that Brennan can get into in behind. So I think that's going to be a really important position in terms of marking Brennan. In terms of the left wing back, well, I think Toff's had a great few weeks, few months, and I think he's been one of the players that has really put it out there and left everything on the pitch. Bit of a cliche, but he has, and he really we saw it in that interview he did after the game. Obviously, he got the goal, he almost got a second goal. He really wants to be on that pitch at the moment, and it feels like he's really fighting for the manager. So it's a no-brainer that he'll be on there. I think obviously he's not got the pace that Brennan's got, but he's played against him a lot in training, no doubt, and hopefully he'll be able to bring some of that into the game. But there's threats all over that front line from Spurs, and obviously, whilst Brennan is an incredible player and we all know all about him, I'm probably slightly more worried about Son through the middle.
Me too. Keep your comments. Keep your comments coming on YouTube. Toby says, "Of course we missed Johnson, but the fee made it very hard to turn down." Marty says, "Put Toffolo in on the defender for Brennan, as discussed then just by George." DJ Tone says Johnson has been playing on the left, so Nico will have to pick him up if he plays. And then Barry finally saying that Murillo is showing he is the best transfer for Forest. Seb, from that kind of Spurs perspective, George just mentioned there. Son, he was in kind of fitness and injury doubts, but did start against Newcastle and had a great game in the 4-1 win. How dangerous is he for Tottenham? And kind of how well has he done under Postecoglou? Not only has the whole squad done well for Tottenham this season so far, but it seems like Postecoglou's really getting the best out of him.
Yeah, I think giving him the captain's armband as well, he's really stepped up since Kane left. I think at times he can get lost a little bit in that central role. He's not your typical number 9 that's going to hold the ball up and bring others into play like Kane used to do for us. But he actually played off the left against Newcastle with Richarlison up front, and I thought Son looked like a different player, like the son of old, just taking the ball, going up against Trippier one-on-one and just getting past him every single time. So I reckon you guys will probably have to contend with Son on the left and Richarlison up front again come tomorrow night.
That sounds
great.
Great. Optimistic as ever now. Thanks, Seb. But in terms of the job that Postecoglou's done, Seb, for me, he's such a likeable manager, similar to Cooper, speaks very well to the press and just seems really like the fans love him at Tottenham, but also fans at other clubs seem to love him. Just how good as a job has he done for Spurs this season?
Yeah, I mean, he's transformed the club completely in a matter of 4 or 5 months. I think with the greatest respect to them as well as managers, but when you're coming off the back of Conte, Mourinho, and Nuno, we were so starved of attacking football and exciting football. So he's come in and just shaken the club up, given the fans what they want, but it actually looks to be a very sustainable and progressive model. So yeah, I think we're just loving life at the minute, just game to game, not too fussed about the results at the minute, but yeah, just enjoying watching Tottenham play proper football again.
Seems like Forest might need to get back to that as well, George. I mean, in terms of the football that Steve Cooper is playing at the minute, and we mentioned there against Wolves, he changed it again, and he's struggling to find that consistency in the Forest squad at the minute. And we touched on it here on the Garibaldi Red as well after the Wolves game about the team selections. Do you think, George, that Cooper's got such a difficult job because of the sheer amount of players in the squad? And almost it's so hard to find that consistency when one week he'll field a team and we go and lose 5-0 to Fulham, and then he'll field a completely different team. And we actually have quite a solid performance against Wolves. It's so hard for a manager to actually find that consistency, isn't it?
Yeah, I think last season we obviously really struggled in the first, what was it? It was kind of the first month, 2 months maybe, in finding the best team. And then we found it. Probably a bit before Christmas, we found it. And then we were fairly consistent with the team that we put out, barring the injuries, etc. He seems to have really struggled to have found his team. And it is understandable. Obviously, a lot of additional players. I think obviously we're now seeing a team that's being put out, which has a lot more of last season's players in the starting 11. And it seems to be the team that is performing a little bit stronger. So I think there probably is, listen, at the end of the day, in the kind of the football environment, I'm sure there is a lot of pressure from above to play certain players when you've spent a lot of money on them, or when you brought them in the first place at all. However, I'm not entirely sure that too many of the players we brought in the summer have been an improvement on the team that started at the end of last season. I think the other big thing is obviously without our main man up top. I think we really, really struggle with a lack of quality depth in that forward position, and that's why I do think the kind of the pressure on Cooper is extra harsh, because it's very, very difficult in the Premier League to get results when you haven't got a really decent quality striker up top. So I think that's a big challenge, and no matter who you're playing behind him, we're always going to slightly struggle for goals.
Yeah, Steve Cooper had his press conference earlier today. Our very own Sarah Clapson was there, and she told me Cooper was pretty happy. He seemed like his usual self, and he said that Taiwo was still having a positive impact on the Forest squad, despite being on the sidelines for what will probably be another few months. Seb, in terms of kind of, again, from that Spurs perspective, do you think this is a game that Tottenham fans will be targeting, as I don't like to use the word easy 3 points, because there is no easy game, as discussed earlier, in the Premier League, but this is a game that surely you'll be coming to the City Ground on Friday night and hoping for a good win?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you say, there's no easy wins. Up until last week against Newcastle, we've gone 5 without a win. So I think it would be stupid to just rule Nottingham Forest out completely. Typically this season, even in those 5 that we couldn't buy a win, the first kind of 20-25 minutes, we were just all over the opposition. Probably should have gone 2-3 up in every single one of those games. So yeah, I think if you grind out those first 20 minutes and you're still at 0-0, then yeah, I think you've got every shout at getting like a win, let alone a draw. Yeah, this Tottenham team's got a lot of injuries at the minute. There's a lot of areas to get at, I think. And with Postecoglou and the way that he plays, there are gaps at the back, especially if you've got pace up top. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a really, really open game, and it depends which team plays at maybe 100% and which team plays at 90%. But it's going to be exciting, I think.
Do you think Forest will try and target those gaps, George? And I suppose Cooper, being the man he is, will try and get a game plan that can really take the game to Spurs, really. And I think the biggest thing for Forest would actually be to start well and probably get an early goal to kind of get the crowd behind them.
Yeah, no, definitely. The only thing on that, we have had a bit of a tendency this season to score that early goal and then really sit back, like from an early stage where it's like, come on, keep. So I am slightly cautious about that. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to probably pick a very similar team to last week. I think it will be a team that's going to be fighting and scrapping. I think Yates will be in there, obviously, with Nico and Toffolo, and I think I think it's going to be full of players that are going to really be fighting and scrapping and working hard. So I think we are going to be out from the blocks and really putting pressure on Spurs from the first minute. And then I think it's all about who he picks up top. I think that's maybe where he might change it, whether he wants to bring Hudson-Odoi and kind of look to play 3 up top, or whether he sticks with the 2. But clearly, no matter which direction he goes, we've got pace. And that's something that we kind of have been looking at over the last few weeks, isn't it? Playing that early ball and kind of really looking to get our quick players in behind. So I'm sure that will probably be a trend that we see again tomorrow night.
Yeah, Seb, just finally then, how can you actually see the game going overall? Predictions from a Spurs point of view?
I'll be wary, seeing as it's a Forest podcast.
It's
I'm
all
gonna
right, mate. You can say
go.
what you want.
I would hope that Tottenham are going to get the win. I'm hoping that the Newcastle win is kickstarting some kind of run of good form again. So I think earlier today I predicted 3-1 Tottenham, so I'll stick with that.
Yeah, and certainly that result could probably see the pressure mount on Steve Cooper. Richard asked earlier, do you think that Cooper will go if we lose? And there's quite a few comments as well coming in about Steve Cooper. One here from Marty saying, my only concern about Cooper is that he has these better players, but he doesn't know or hasn't figured out yet how to utilise them.
Has he, Max? Do you think he has got better players? Do you think he has? There are a few. I'm sure there's a couple there for sure. But do you think he has got a significantly better squad this season? Genuine question.
I think on paper, George, that you could argue that Forest squad is better than last season. You know, we've spent 50 million on Sangare, record transfer fee. But I think the problem that Forest find, I'm sure you agree at the minute, George, I think it's more that consistency than ever and getting the best out of those players. I actually agree with Marty. I think the likes of Gibbs White haven't been at his best recently. Hudson-Odoi, albeit he's been obviously, a little bit injury prone recently. The same with Elanga. Do you think then, George, kind of from your point of view, that Forest have actually had a better squad on paper last season?
No, probably not. I think that the only thing I would say is the Brennan factor, in which I touched upon earlier, is that he could pull a rabbit out of the hat when we weren't playing well, when he wasn't playing well, when everything seemed against us, and it's like, oh, he's just taken on a player, crossed it in, and Taiwo's knocked it in, and we scored. So I think losing that is significant. I don't think we've signed a player nearly as good as Brennan. I think obviously we spent a lot of money on Sangare. We haven't. I'm really, really hoping we haven't seen the best of him yet. That's for sure. But we all know that it can be really difficult to jump straight into the Premier League and all of a sudden, and look like a multi-million pound player. So let's obviously give that time. But I think we've signed some, really good players. I think we've clearly signed an incredible centre back, Marino. But I don't think the squad is so much better. I think we haven't got, our goalkeepers last year were better. We had a brilliant, we had probably a very similar defense to last year, but we've obviously lost a great left back. Aurier's not as fit as he was last year. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think I don't think the squad. I think the squad is better. I think the starting 11 arguably isn't. That'd be my take on it. But I can see how you could argue either way.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we do lack, George, and you look at from Seb's perspective, a Tottenham squad where it has an abundance of players that can change games and come off the bench. Yeah. Forest don't have that at the minute, do they, George? And even the likes of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, who of course were signed on a bit of a cheaper option to replace Brennan, they even haven't been performing to the best of their ability at the minute, or at least what we could potentially see from them as well.
I mean, Elanga would be the most incredible sub. He would be the most incredible sub. You could imagine a centre-back 70 minutes in thinking, oh no.
We saw it at the Arsenal game.
Yeah.
We saw it at
do not put him on. He would tear me apart. He's going to absolutely outrun me. They're going to. Yeah. Obviously, he's been forced to start every single game, so we haven't been able to see him come off the bench. So I think you're obviously right. We do lack really class quality attacking options coming on from the bench and just making a difference, and that's a big factor. And we've seen it quite a few times where we've lost goals and we've kind of not been able to make an impact in the final third of the game. And yeah, I mean, I do think going in attacking positions, we lack that depth.
Yeah, Ian says Smiles better this season in terms of, I guess he's talking about the squad on paper, just needs to get them played in the right positions. If we get Nino and play three at the back and wing back, Sangare must fit in front of the three in a diamond and in front of these three. Ian, it sounds like you could probably go for the Forest job if Cooper does get the sack. I mean, this is the sad thing, isn't it, George? And I'll come to you in a minute, Seb, as well, from your perspective of Steve Cooper at Forest, is that it seems like he's on this kind of one game rolling basis. Do you think that if Forest lose on Friday night, tomorrow, that he could possibly be gone? And do you think it would be the right decision to get rid of him?
Two different answers. First one, yes, I think he probably will go. I mean, if reports are accurate, then he's clearly it's on a knife edge, and obviously it sounds like a good excuse to say goodbye would be the way the club want to go. Clearly, if we win, it's very, very difficult to get rid of him. And if you keep going on a winning roll, it's difficult to. But I mean, there was a story earlier today, which you've no doubt read, in which it was saying this isn't sustainable. We can't go on little runs where we get a decent amount of points, and it's like, okay, he's okay for now, and then we go on a run and we lose 3 or 4 games, which is going to happen in the Premier League. And then every single time it's like, oh, his job's at risk. It's not sustainable. You need to either move on or you need to go, look, we can make this work, and this is our man. The second part about would I be sad to see him go? Do I think it would be fair to see him go? No, absolutely not. I mean, the job that he did to get us up, say no more. The job that he did to keep us up last year, absolutely incredible. And we're not even in the relegation zone. We've had a really bad run, obviously, but you've got to look at it as a beyond just these little tiny, micro trends. You've got to look at it as a season. So far, we're still out of the relegation zone. And I don't believe there are that many Forest fans out there that truly believe we, as a team, especially with the injuries we've had in 4 positions, are a team that should be in the top half of the Premier League or even near the top half. Like, the reality of our situation is right now, staying in the Premier League for another season, unless we have a full, unless we have no injuries and we've got a full strength squad, in my eyes, staying in the Premier League would be, a job well done. And right now we're out of the relegation zone. So I think it would be, a ridiculous decision to get rid of him. But would I be surprised? Absolutely not.
Yeah, certainly with it being kind of a results-driven basis as well, business as well. Seb, in terms of your perspective, watching Cooper and watching Forest in the Premier League last season, and of course this season for the second season, Tottenham have had numerous managers, similar to Forest, constantly changing. Would you think it would be a silly decision for Forest to get rid of Cooper, given a bad result against Spurs tomorrow?
I don't know if this is the game to make the decision on. Like you said, like you're like 5 clear of the relegation zone at the minute. I just think after all he's been through with the club and after all he's done for the club, he probably deserves a little bit longer. At least get him to halfway through the season and see where you're at. I have been expecting Forest to kind of kick on a bit more. But you've got to wonder, like, if you get rid of him, who is going to come in, and are they going to do a better job than someone that's been there so long and knows the club so well? I don't know. I just, in football in general, especially the Premier League, I think clubs could sometimes do themselves a favour by giving a manager the benefit of the doubt for a little bit longer, rather than just always giving into the pressure and getting rid at the first sign of trouble. So yeah, I hope he stays regardless of what the result is this weekend.
And we saw that last season, Seb. We saw last season the teams that stuck with their manager were the teams that in the end stayed up. And, that's a lesson that I feel like if we ignore, we might regret, Max.
Yeah, finally then, George, your prediction for tomorrow night.
I mean, Spurs' form has been a bit all over the place over the last month or so. So it's really hard to predict. But obviously following that victory the other night, it could go one way or the other. They could absolutely kill us, and it could be 3-4-1. I think there's goals in it no matter what. Or it might just be one of those City ground nights that, everything kind of goes our way. We get a bit lucky and we end up winning 2-1. Honestly, I think given the way Spurs have been playing, I think I might copy Seb and go 3-1 Spurs. I know that's being really, really negative. But I would love it. I would love it if we can nick something. What do you think, Max? What do you think?
I'm going to be positive and say I've just seen a comment actually from Jordan that says Forest are going to win 1-0. So I'm going to go with 1-0, but I also think a bad performance and a bad defeat for Forest, if it was in the case of a 3-1 loss, like you just said then, George, I think that could sadly be the end of Steve Cooper. But given the results and given the pressure he's under, you can't really say it hasn't been coming. So fingers crossed.
That was a really negative response for me. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go. We're going to win.
Come on, George.
We're going to win 2-1. There we go. I've changed. Yeah, come on. Bit of positivity. All right. I apologize.
Exactly. We've been and a lot of Forest fans have said that we've been positive on this podcast. So let's keep the positivity going.
Yeah.
Right. That is all from us. We will see you on Saturday morning after the Forest game for a chat about the game against Tottenham. And of course, we'll keep you updated with whatever happens on Steve Cooper if Forest lose. We'll then see you next week for our main episode as well. Thank you, George, for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Max, for having me.
You're welcome. You're most welcome. Seb, thank you. I was going to say enjoy tomorrow, but don't enjoy it too much.
I'll enjoy the game at least.
Yes.
Maybe not the result.
You never know. Thanks for tuning in as always. Thanks for your comments on this edition of Garibaldi Red. Remember to drop us a like and leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe and follow on YouTube. We will see you next time. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.